Right, good afternoon and welcome back to SME SDG Festival 2021 organized by UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei. Thank you for still joining us, for still being here. Thank you very much. It is always a challenge for a conference to resume after a lunch break, but hopefully you've enjoyed your lunch and hopefully you took some time to visit our virtual exhibitions and also to drop by at the virtual networking lounge for you to meet other participants in this event. Nonetheless, coming up is a very interesting subject, our second or third panel session rather. As I mentioned before, this is where we can help you to prepare for the next big shift. We're going to talk about the trends, pitfalls, and response. The panelists for this session are Mr. Lee Siu Ming, Senior Analyst, Socioeconomics and Statistics of Penang Institute, Ms. Arina Kok, Partner, Climate Change and Sustainability Services of EY Malaysia, Ms. Adrienna Zsakay, Chief Executive Officer of Circular Asia Association, and the moderator for this panel session is the founder of INTI Education Group, which started operations in 1986 and is currently the chairman of INTI Education Holdings, which is the ultimate holding company for INTI University and colleges. Now, he was conferred the degree of Doctor of Business Administration, honoris causa, from the Coventry University, UK in 2002, and the honorary doctor degree of laws from University of Hertfordshire in 2003 in recognition for his outstanding contribution to international education. Now, INTI has an established network of 6 campuses in the country, including a full-fledged university, INTI International University, with a total enrollment of 17,000 students. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to pass the floor over to our moderator yang berbahagia, Datuk Tan Yu Sing, President of Malaysia-China Chambers of Commerce. Over to you, Datuk.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And good afternoon to everybody online. Now, this is the third panel, and the topic is preparing for the new big shift, trends, pitfalls, and response. This topic is very exciting, especially for SME facing the uncertainty now. There are a few main issues we are going to talk about. One is we are going to explore about the key to thriving in this emerging economy. And the second also, we also want to talk about the pitfalls and looking out for the danger signs. And finally, we are covering the appropriate responses to current and emerging risks and opportunities. We are very honored to have 3 distinguished panelists able to come and share with us their idea. Let me briefly introduce all the 3 panelists. Mr. Lee Siu Ming, he's a senior analyst, socioeconomics and statistics in Penang Institute. And Mr. Lee, he is a senior analyst at Penang Institute, and his professional experience includes working for an export promotion agency under Ministry of Plantation Industry and Commodities of Malaysia, and also investment promotion agency in Penang State Government. Now, he have actually research interests include international economics, business economics, economics development, and policy analysis. We have next Ms. Arina Kok, partner in the Climate Change and Sustainability Services of Ernst & Young Malaysia. She is a partner in Ernst & Young Berhad, and she specializes in integrated sustainability reporting and the incorporation of environmental, social, and governance (ESG). This is extension of our topic SDG into financial decision making. Arina has facilitated numerous ESG workshops, discussion for corporations, for government agencies, and on behalf of Bursa Malaysia and also Security Commission Malaysia. Arina also recently led the analysis of Malaysian top 100 public listed companies reporting disclosure against the Global Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure (TCFD) recommendation and issuance of an inaugural EY Climate Risk Disclosure Barometer (CRDB) 2020. And finally, I'd like to introduce Ms. Arina Zsakay. She's the CEO of Circular Asia Association, and this was founded by herself in 2016. Her journey began when she became interested in infrastructure design for recyclable resources recovery correction system. And she actually transitioned into circular economy and the founding of Circular Economy Asia. They call it CAA. And in early 2020, Ms. Zsakay launched the Circular Skills, an online education platform dedicated to skills development for the circular economy. Ms. Zsakay also lived in various countries across Asian region, and she has studied international and Asian food law in Michigan State University. I think we all should welcome three of them here in this panel, and we will be very interested to listen to their enlightening speech. Now, let me go straight into the questions. I'm going to pose various questions, and our panelists are free to answer. The first question I'd like to pose to Ming because he is specialized in trends analysis. Our Malaysia SME now are living in very uncertain time. And from day to day, it seems almost impossible for them to predict what will come next. So, what are the current and also emerging market trends to offer opportunity for SMEs from Xiuming's your own research? And hope you enlighten us.
Yeah.
Xiuming, pass to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Datuk. Definitely, I think towards the Agenda 2030, we are beginning this new decade in a very challenging situation with the pandemic, with lockdown. And definitely, SMEs are also facing these challenges. And we have also seen the contribution of SMEs falling to the GDP falling year on year based on the report that we have last year. In terms of trends that we are seeing in the growth areas, in growth sectors, definitely because of the pandemic and also work from home trends, there is an acceleration towards digitalization and automation, hardware and software, and this is expected to continue. We are also seeing in terms of spending into electronics, health services, and medical devices, also in terms of renewable energy. With the vaccination now, consumption is expected to grow with the economic recovery, but there may be behavior changes in terms of the shift towards more responsible production based in goods and services. We I think for the SMEs, we are also recommending some of these recommendations in terms of looking at export opportunities and markets, the localization which is being pushed more by the government agencies now, especially when there is this pandemic. And the third, we are also proposing that the SMEs take advantage of the incentives and policies, including to fulfill multi-pronged objectives of SDGs. So businesses can plan not only to hit one or two goals, but also to hit a few goals with one action. And this, for example, one small example that I can take, the green incentive that we have in the recent budget, they can also apply it for low-hanging fruits, low-hanging efforts such as rainwater harvesting in their own facilities. So these are some of the trends and also recommendations that we have for SMEs, which we understand are also facing challenges in the current situation.
Thank you, Shuming. Our two lady panelists, additional comment, please.
Yeah, I have some
Hello.
additional comments to make. So Suming has focused really on the business components, the economic components, of course, as he should, because that's his area of speciality. But this program is hosted by the UN on SDG. And I think that we shouldn't forget that all economic activity going forward by SMEs needs to be underpinned by sustainable and circular practices. So I would dearly love to ask for Suming to expand his scope of reference for the future to be able to ensure that this value, this additional value, because the world is increasingly going to demand that. We're going to see more and more banks that are going to define their cost of capital around ESG. We're going to see insurance agencies going to be defining their insurance policies around how well a company can mitigate its climate change risk. And SMEs are incredibly vulnerable to this. The Industry Association, which Datuk Khan heads up, is well placed to be able to communicate these risks and also provide solutions. So it's vital that this narrative and this dialogue is well woven in to the discussion in regards to SMEs. So that way we reduce uncertainty. We all know businesses do not like risk, they do not like uncertainty, and we need to be able to significantly reduce this for SMEs to be able to move forward comfortably.
Thank you. It's all about preparing for uncertainty and way to face them. Ms. Arina Kok, you have something to add on?
Yes, I think echoing what Ms. Arina have mentioned, I think from a Malaysia local context, what's important to note is Bank Negara has also issued in April the climate change and principle-based taxonomy. They have also came up with the value-based sectorial guide on how to actually move ahead on some of the focus areas like palm oil, energy efficiency, renewable energy. Now, what all these means that the regulators such as Bank Negara is pushing towards is a coordinated effort to evaluate ESG performance of company. So as what has been mentioned, moving forward, what you will see almost quite immediately in the next 12 months to 1 year, banks will start to ask about your ESG performance, targets, as well as risk. Now, if you don't have those readily to defend, they will then have to put a risk evaluation on your criteria based on what you don't have. So they will have to tell the story on your behalf. I'll give you one key example. If you are in the agriculture sector and you haven't gotten your MSPO certification, or you're trading with supply chains who doesn't have MSPO certification, now this is going to be one of the key issues. The thing is, would you have lending issues moving forward? How do you overcome it? Those will start to creep in a more strategic manner. While on the good side, we have seen our government in the recent budget, RMK 12, who have outlined quite a number of circular economy efforts, or at least the intention. They are going to introduce a blueprint for the circular economy covering scheduled waste, plastic, agri-commodities. They are also looking for an integrated waste management facilities. They are looking to integrate water resource management. So there are a number of initiatives put in place and in plan. Now, what does this mean is, how can businesses then, with this understanding of this landscape, start to look at the partnerships, what are the innovations, and where to tap on these areas? Because government have also put out the incentives such as pioneer status, investments tax allowances, to actually look at where are the companies who are doing high value added local waste recycling activities and utilizing green technologies. Now, if you're in this space and you're driving this kind of advancement or partnerships, you would be able to harness, the economic efficiencies, or at least get green or sustainable finance partner better with the large corporates in your value chain and enhance the resilience of your business because you are moving ahead along your other competitors. So these are the two landscape I want to show. So it's no longer viable for companies to stay put in where you are because the risk is going to either drive you out from your value chain, or if done well, you want to be in the sweet spots to actually drive growth where all the investors, stakeholders are putting their bets on as we move into this low carbon economy.
Yeah, we can actually see. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, I just have one question to ask you, Datuk Tan.
Yeah.
And following on from Arina's great evaluation, you, in a previous conversation that we had earlier in this, prior to today's event, you mentioned that in your Chamber of Commerce, you have 1,800 members.
Right.
Approximately.
Right.
Out of those 1,800 members, how many of them would be in touch with Bank Negara?
Well, I don't have that survey figure, but
No,
when you say,
but just you're off the top
when you
of
say
your head.
in
Just,
touch with Bank Negara, whichever company that they actually need to raise loan, normally they will go through the individual bank. But I think if today we are talking about additional incentive and SDG, that's where I think today's seminar will be useful for them to know. And I was just trying to say that this panel is very useful because we have different background. We have Ming, who is more from the analysis and trend. And then we have somebody who have worked with a statutory body like Arina, who work with SC, who work with Bursa, so she can share with us later maybe some of the potential even incentive that can be provided and opportunity. Of course, we have Arina yourself that you have experience of not just in Malaysia, you also travel around. But let me come back to the second question from what we say just now about the trends. Now, let us talk about, you see, the major focus of today's panel is about sustainability, SDG sustainability. But the sustainability is difficult, as we said, because of uncertainty. Now, the COVID, the pandemic have exposed many areas, and from income disparity, from cash reserve, cash flow, liquidity, safety nets of employees, wages, health problem, things like that. Now all these are something that SME is going to face. Now, they all point to one thing. I mean, you can never do the business as such. Just one of the panelists say, you cannot do it as an old way anymore. And the traditional way, some of them may be unsustainable. So now we have to talk about what danger or warning signs that that the SME must be aware, and then how it will affect them, and how are they going to prepare themselves to face these issues. Should I get Arina to start telling us a little bit, because of your experience, you may have met many of them, your Ernst & Young working.
Yeah, so I think one of the few key challenge that we see is when companies actually look at ESG, it's usually looked at it as a very silo manner, right? They get either their operation team to manage the health and safety issues without the understanding of what are the strategic business model that needs to shape or be transformed. Or sometimes we see companies that actually get their marketing arm or investor relation to drive the coverage of why the company is doing great stuff. And this is something probably have, been existing from a flow on from most companies' effort in community, the CSR programs, right? Corporate sustainability or corporate social responsibility programs that most companies have driven over many decades. Now, the clear shift is we have to understand that CSR is no longer sufficient. No doubt there are still people who are in need of funds to, get through their lives. But when we talk about sustainability, it's about whole of stakeholders. It's about whether the businesses is fit for society. Now, when we bring that conversation of whether the business is fit for society, what we see in most companies is either the C-suites and the CEO have a well understanding of how to embed this within their operations end to end. That means the CEO, the CFO, the Chief Operating Officer, and the Strategy Officer, they all understand and they look at it from an ESG lens. There is certain tools enabled for them to evaluate risks and opportunities, or they don't have. So it's a yes or no when we evaluate companies as a starting point. For companies that start to understand and weave in, they will start to not just have a one person or one team, but they will move and shift towards getting the ESG understanding, not just from the C-suite, but developed all the way down, having a clear ESG or sustainability framework that talks about what are the ways of working and what are the strategies that the company is going to pivot and tap on when it comes to sustainability. Are there goals and targets set? And are these measurements or metrics being monitored and linked to the respective individual's KPI, remuneration, or bonuses? So these are the very vast difference. If you look at those who are already on board, it's very clear in the way they structure their remuneration and performance to link back to some of these areas versus those that, have not or have still putting it in a very silo boxed sustainability management mindset. So the idea is the difference is what's the value proposition to shift and transfer. The very boxed up silo manner, you only have efforts on sustainability driven by a pool of people, right? And a very small pool of people. But as you pivot and you have a clear holistic whole of organization structure, framework, targets, you are essentially rallying the whole company to look after ESG or safeguard the ESG performance, or best case scenario, innovate and strategize on ESG. That means you are rallying even down to the working level, the clerk, the office boy, to understand how they can be more efficient. It drives cost savings. It drives, what are the innovative ways to do it better. Now, that is what you're hoping to pivot and achieve. So the idea is really to get on the journey to transit, but to understand that it's not just a lip service, because companies will face issues like greenwashing, social washing, and it's a matter of time when you get audited, or at least your customers want to evaluate your actual performance. You don't have anything to show or be ready for.
I think this is very good reminder for our SME, as Arina was saying. It's a matter of time. It is definitely coming. So if you are going to work on the old value method, I think it doesn't work. And I think it actually shows that the whole company, the organizational culture have to evolve slowly with this new idea of SDG and things like that. But let me invite the other two panelists. Anyone to add on from what Arina has said? Arina, do you have anything to add on?
Well, I have a question really, because there's one thing that I'm a little confused about, is that my definition of SME maybe appears to be a little bit different from Arina's definition of SME. Most SMEs that I know don't have the corporate structure that Arina has been talking about here and describing. Most SMEs that I know don't have the internal structure. So their ability to be able to grasp the necessities of sustainability is very, very different. So I get the feeling that Arina's definition, and it's completely applicable to companies listed on Bursa Malaysia, and even on the second board, smaller corporations that are listed on the second board. This is completely applicable. But I live in Malacca, and in Malacca, when I go around Malacca, it's a microcosm of micro SMEs and SMEs. So it's this group that we need to include. I mean, micro SMEs are particularly problematic when we try and include them, but there are many positive ways which we can engage them, not necessarily on a very formal basis, not necessarily on the whole full ESG metrics and reporting, because they're never going to make it, and they're certainly not going to be interested in it. And it was the reason why I asked the question to you, Datuk, about your membership profile. You know, what's your membership profile? What are the size of your SMEs that are, you know, my question related to really Bursa Malaysia is that how many are following the guidance issued by Bursa Malaysia? I can certainly tell you, going around here in Malacca, I cannot imagine many SMEs are following the guidance by Bursa Malaysia, but it's these SMEs that are critical to the management of the three pillars within. We have, you know, obviously, you know, environment, social and governance, but within environment, there are three pillars, and that's generally, I'm being very general now, and that is water, waste and energy. And so these are three particular areas that all companies, regardless of if they're micro all the way through to listed companies, are well placed to participate in. And so how we engage them is really necessary for Malaysia and for, you know, governments here, state governments, local governments, to be able to you know, work with various stakeholders to ensure it's an inclusive transition to a sustainable and circular country.
Maybe before Arina answer, maybe I will chip in as well. I think when we mention SME, we don't include micro. I never use the term micro SME. So SME is one area. The micro, the self-employed, is even lower than SME. Because small and medium, they have a definition. But there are a lot of self-employed, sometimes family business, 2 or 3 person. True enough, they don't have a corporate structure. But as I said, if I think our government is serious in pushing, and they are, and for example, if they want to raise loan, and if Bank Negara would have some ruling that there are some area you need to satisfy, then you have a better funding opportunity. I think all businesses will try to learn and try to be prepared to answer to some of it. Of course, that if they don't have a corporate or don't have their sort of expertise they employ them their own expertise, but they can be services provided to upgrade, to instill a culture of emphasize on sustainability, on all the governance. I think it's still not impossible. Habitual domain is something not easy to change, but then I think we have to start with a small step. Answer to our MCCC, for Malaysian-China Chamber of Commerce, what's majority are the real sense of SME. We don't have include micro or even these self-employed, because at the moment, my chamber is those doing business with China, talking about export and things like that. So the real micro are normally very localized businesses. So I think that is just a simple answer. But I think I should be fair to get a chance for Arina. You want to respond the question?
Yes. Yep. So I do agree there are many differing types of businesses and different tiering of SMEs as well. So what we are looking is best practices. And I think in Malaysia, because everyone is very commonly managing the ESG, as and when there are advancements of regulations, and especially when it becomes a cost to the business. But I think where we are looking for is the better practices to be more proactive, to anticipate. For example, if you talk about the nation is also going towards having carbon pricing. Now, what this means is our local Malaysians will no longer enjoy, to a certain extent, depending how it's being implemented, may no longer enjoy as much subsidized energy costs or maybe water, for example. Now, in this avenue, how prepared are businesses to actually consider? There's two things that we have asked businesses regardless of size. The government has actually rolled out the no single-use plastic roadmap by 2030. Of course, subject to how it's being, phased up in terms of how they're going to implement, whether is it going to be a penalization or is there a way that they're going to look at? But if there is going to be cost on emissions, like how we see in Singapore, carbon tax is actually being slapped on very much high emission companies, especially in the industrial sector. And in Malaysia, we know that carbon pricing will be coming. It's a matter of undefined timeline, right? We have the zero single-use plastic roadmap, and within that roadmap, by 2022, is going to enhance the coverage, plastic films, the packaging materials and all. Now, all these, when it comes, what will be the cost to business? Because regardless of size of business, these are resources that the companies use. So the idea then is, where I'm trying to put a point is whether the organization have a legit or a very robust structure of governance. It's also important to understand how this comes in terms of management. So yes, we do see for a lot of SMEs, the CEO multitask the head of the CFO, right? They manage the business and the finance, or run a few multiple roles as an entrepreneur. But it doesn't take away the need, as what I mentioned, for them to understand what are the ESG risks to their businesses and be more targeted in addressing it, setting performance, and look at what are the targets that they hope to achieve, whether the targets are going to be in line, non-competing to their economic targets like profit, profitability and revenue, but it's going to help them to increase and enhance their profitability and revenue. So those are the pivoting strategy that these SMEs will also now need to be open to explore and embrace. Otherwise, it's a matter of we have an understanding that all resources comes with a cost, and it's only going to get higher.
Okay, I think Ming may have something to add on. Do you?
Yeah, just very short part to add on, because this question relates to supply chain as well. And I think to SMEs, it is also about scaling up always. And when you scale up, you want to be a supplier and approved supplier to major customers as well. So I think the fulfillment of SDGs tracking and monitoring and improvements there, and the ESG fulfillment is also important to consider your next customer's requirement to be an approved supplier, or that alliances, for example, within the E&E industry here in Penang and in Malaysia, many of their major customers are part of the RBA, the Responsible Business Alliance, and there are requirements within the alliance, within these major customers. So if it's not being tracked and being tracked and properly monitored now, it will also come to you later on when you want to scale and to apply to become an approved supplier. Or if you are already a supplier, the audits will also come to check on, and this will continue to, there will be goalposts that will always be imposed to improve on more of the ESG items. So I think in the supply chain part for SMEs should really be cognizant of all these changes among their suppliers, among their customers. Sorry.
The next actually, there are of course comments saying that this SDG, they are too extravagant for small businesses, for those self-employed, because they can't afford not just financial resources, but even their networking, everything, and they are so busy to make ends meet. Maybe this is a topic where Arina will be able to enlighten us that is it true that they can't afford, that's why they find difficulty to follow this agenda. But if they want to follow, how should they begin this SME SDG journey, especially referring to the micro or even self-employed. That's going to be very, very inclusive. So Arina, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Okay, so there are two areas. First of all, the first area is what I call context. And this is where the government can set the context. So it's very important that SMEs, and including micro businesses, but in particular SMEs, is that they understand why. Why should they engage in what they see as a cost? This has been one of the biggest hurdles that we've faced, and I'm sure Arina can agree with me here, is that most companies see sustainability and the circular economy as a cost. So getting past that barrier is critically important, and this is where government has a role to play. So going back to the three pillars under the environment, water, waste and energy, the government has a role to play in regards to setting the context. And I think water is a really great example, especially seeing now that it's been included into the 12th Malaysia plan, is that the government has now highlighted the need to get into water management. But that also includes water conservation. So there are some very visible activities that the government can engage in regards to demonstrating the necessity for water conservation and water management. And this sets the context for SMEs to understand why they should participate in water management. It's also, there are various NGOs around Malaysia that could be engaged and could be trained in regards to delivering educational or skills training services to help companies understand how they can improve their water management and water conservation. So there's this particular type of work that is another variation perhaps of public-private partnership, perhaps not in the strict definition that we understand, but in a broader, more fluid context of how we understand public-private partnerships, where the government understands its role to play in regards to engaging the SME sector into understanding why they need to embrace sustainability. But there's also the second part, and Arina has talked a little bit about this also as well in regards to setting the framework about how SMEs, and I'm just in the process of finishing a UN course that really talks about how, what are the steps that SMEs can engage in regards to actually embedding a sustainable program within their company. So this is part of an area that my organisation is very focused about, skills training. But some of the work we do is really interested about the circular economy. And this UN course that I'm doing broadens that scope of work and actually butts into a standard. And this standard is one area that the UN really wants to develop in regards to financing. So impact investing, we all know that this is a really big grey area. What does impact investing mean? What's green investing? Circular economy investing, I can tell you that's not very well defined at all. So setting a standard and having companies meet that standard and understanding their operational activities within that, it can be very important. So two areas, the external area of why a company needs to embrace sustainability. And this, again, is an external issue, perhaps, again, with government leading the way. And then there's the internal issue about how a company can have its own, it can meet particular standards. And the standards are not difficult. They're not hard, they're not difficult, but it's the standards that can meet investor expectations for impact investing.
Okay, thank you. Ming, anything to add on?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I think, as mentioned earlier, at times, that hurdle of talking about that cost is really an important part for SMEs. And I think also we are also seeing that being part of an association, a group, the SME associations, for example, and talking about it together as a group gives more opportunities for these companies to come together and see on certain benchmarking that not big companies are doing, but their peers are doing, and it can be adapted. And we see such example among Samantha members or the SME association members. And I think that will be a good group for SMEs to be together to look at best practices among peers first before adapting to big companies, because that cost structure, I think, among the organizations are quite different also.
Okay. And Miss Arina, your additional words?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of significant opportunities, for growth, profitability, and new business models. We've already seen the very young social entrepreneurs coming up with solutions to tackle the circular economy, like urban farming. We've seen a number of urban farming, and it's a matter of time. There will be enhancement of scales at large, where all townships or cities that wants to be sustainable and less dependent on import of organic food from overseas will adopt urban farming to a certain extent as a mainstay. Now, a lot of social entrepreneurs have looked at those kind of solutions as where to grow their business. The other part we're also looking is on waste management. In Malaysia, unfortunately, we are very poor in handling waste. And we lose, in March this year, the newspaper has outlined that in March, we lose 4 billion ringgit in recycling revenue a year, because 75% of plastic waste does not end up being recycled. And this was reported by World Bank. So with that kind of mindset, we understand that had businesses tap on the opportunity to manage waste, there are significant revenue and opportunities to tap on, because we still have not circumvented a lot of issues within the circular economy. And these are where the new business model, when I say fit for purpose in the future, these are the kind of mindset and business model that will be attractive. And that's where it will get the support from lending, employees to join. These are things that you will be in that better position. So I would say that we should be more optimistic, and for the SMEs to apply two things when they look at their business strategy. Number one, based on your existing model, how do you maximize the management of ESG so that you do not get into trouble? You are optimized when it comes to ESG, working with what you have first. For example, there are fundamentals that will be risk to you, but if you manage it well, it should not be a risk to you. Like no child labor is a foundation, right? No one should be having child labor at a bare minimum from a social aspects. Now, two things I mentioned. One is, what is your business as usual? Optimize, manage the ESG. Second is strategize. Once you have that avenue to strategize and continuously innovate and think about where your business can either transform or pivot, and then you will be able to enhance, because every business wants to grow. And you want to tap on where the market is of the future will be. This is how you put on the two lens when you think about ESG.
Okay, this is very interesting, because what from our panelists, we can say that when you talk about ESG, you can say your existing business, your traditional business, how you want to upgrade them, how you want to instill this new mentality and framework of thinking about recovery economy and things like that. Because by directly, if you do it now in a midterm, maybe they actually come up with cost saving, and also you have a lot of other incentive government is providing. But the other aspect is more the negative part is, if you do not or you violate, then there is fine. The government is going to give you more difficulty. The funding is going to increase your cost of funding. So there are both prongs to actually encourage our businesses to move towards, and the government is very important. But these are all talking about the traditional. But then I think Arina have highlighted there's also new venture. New venture arise because of all this talk about SDG and things like that. Now, urban farming. In fact, one young man only last week was talking to me about his the new idea about this urban farming. Maybe after this seminar, I should pay more attention and try to understand more from him. But very exciting, new idea all coming up. Now, the last issue we have to talk about is opportunity, because at the end of the day, all our participants today in this webinar, they like to know, and because we are talking about tough challenges, but this new normal, and will be a lot of abundance with opportunity for SME, as we just now also talked a little bit, or even for self-employed and entrepreneurs, things like that. Because as somebody said, crisis is always the time where you have new opportunity arising, and to make our business even more resilient. Now, new normal is definitely coming, not just because of COVID, but also because of all the high tech, all the internet and things like that. So, what should SME do differently tomorrow? We are emphasizing tomorrow, can be near future. And after learning from this session, the session that our three distinguished panelists have shared with us, and with a lot of opportunity presented through the SDG practices and things like that. Now, what are those opportunities we should talk about? And I would open to all our three panelists who want to give the first shot. Ming, yeah.
Okay. I'll relate this back to 2020, 2021, I think, because COVID has given this setting to us. So I think that for businesses, especially SMEs that we have spoken to, many talk about the importance of cash flow and that reserves, and we really understand that for SMEs. So I think we really are highlighting about the importance of cash flow from the business perspective for them. And we are also seeing examples of businesses that are going into being asset light now, and also some of them are also taking on the business on the government initiatives, including subsidized rental space and things like that for pure SMEs. So that's in the business sense. But I think it's also more important to also highlight that in terms of the SDG journey, fulfilling ESG criteria, you do not need to begin from a path of ESG tweak business to fulfill this. So existing businesses would be able to incorporate all this, taking into the considerations of that the targets that are already being set, either the government linked projects or the customer base goals, to then incorporate into their businesses. And I think the earlier I've also shared some of the areas of growth to look into, and I think incorporating technology would be very important into, even though you begin from the path of for example, an environmental problem solver, for example, but adapting the use of technology, we are seeing that will be very important in terms of making it sustainable and scalable, especially for M and also the SMEs. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. And anyone else?
Okay, go right ahead,
No.
Arina. Go right ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. I mine is just a short one. I want to bring it to more of a practical viewpoint, because what we are seeing in Malaysia on businesses is worker shortages, labor shortages. But what we are seeing, this is one issue that businesses are grappling with, right? Because of travel restrictions and all. But the other hand, we are grappling with unemployment rate. While in Malaysia, we have 5% unemployment rate for women is at 15%. So when we look at this too, there's an opportunity to, align where, you are able to source strategically. But the ways of working that we have right now will no longer be the same as pre-COVID. It's not just, I offer you a 9 to 5 job. The reason why is women, to a certain extent, are also most of the time within our region, primary caregivers or principal caregivers of family. So with lockdown and schools not reopening, it's even harder to get them back to the workforce. So it comes back to what are the reopening or strategizing, how do you get this workforce to support you when you have gaps, but by negotiating a value-based structure to really tap on and resolve issues of labor shortages, worker shortages, as well as the talents. So of course it has to be strategized, whether it's the white collar or the blue collar, or it's at the manufacturing or plantation sector. But I think regardless of any sector, the key point is this: you should be able to consider what are the opportunities to overcome the worker or labor shortages, and it's going to be a further war for talents moving forward. The only question then is, how do you evaluate and capture and keep some of this with you in a strategic manner? So, I'm giving a practical consideration because we talked about sustainable development goals. And one of the ways is to enable people to have income to actually get back on work in the way that they can be conducive. So these are things that I would think SMEs should open up their consideration of how to hire strategically and to also resolve two issues at the same time if you are able to relook back at your business model.
Okay, and Arina?
Okay, so I agree with both Ming and Arina that COVID's changed the game. Absolutely, we are never going back to the world that we had pre-COVID. We're not going back to the types of way of working, as Arina has pointed out. We've had a fundamental shift in our work styles. If you go to look for a job these days, you have choices: hybrid, remote, in the office. So, pre-COVID, there was no choice. You applied for a job and you went to work 9 to 5, and that was it. And all that's changed now. So how we work, when we work, is definitely never going to be the same. But my take on what SMEs need to consider today and tomorrow is that I think SMEs have been very quick to dismiss future trends. They've been very quick to think, sustainability is going to go away, or this doesn't apply to me. It only applies to big companies, or it only applies to foreign companies, or it's not important because here in Malaysia, we don't have XYZ. And that's very dangerous for SMEs. I think SMEs can no longer afford to be dismissive. We are in the middle right now. Today is the beginning of the second week of COP26, and I'm not sure about my co-panelists here, but I've been following as much detail as I can about what's going on in COP, so I can get a feel for those trends going forward. And whereas a lot of people may think it's more blah, 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 I actually think that it's really setting the groundwork for some incredible major shifts. And these major shifts won't happen quickly, and it won't happen in a big way. But these are major shifts that are now being put into place that will play out over the next 10 to 15 years. And an SME needs to ask itself, where do I want to be? It's a typical HR question. Where do I want to be in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, and in 15 years' time? And if that SME says, I still want to be operating, doesn't need to be big growth business, but I still want to be operating, and I want to be profitable, and I want to have some reasonable growth, you cannot ignore any longer the sustainability trends, the circular economy trends that will play out and that will affect you, first of all, probably indirectly to begin with, but over time, more and more directly, but you cannot afford to dismiss it. And to me, that's what SMEs should take on board today and tomorrow, and not forget about it.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a question from the participants, and due to the limit of time, I can only allow like each of you 1 minute to answer. The question is very straightforward. You say that almost traditionally in Malaysia businesses, now most of the company only focus into profit rather than social environmental obligation. And how could we change this? And maybe Shuming, you want to start off first?
Yeah. I I yeah, because it's 1 minute, I'll just say that probably in the recent very near examples that we see, some companies that have not adopted some practices, probably in HR, in labor policies, we are seeing some of them now have to improve more of it because of how the standards are changing and how compliance is also being conducted. So I think while costs come very as a principal objective, as a primary objective, this will eventually come, and companies will eventually need to fulfill certain adherence to the ESG and SDG objectives.
Okay, thank you. Arina, your comment?
I think the key thing is for companies who only measure profit, I think they, as what Adrienna said, are going to be trading on dangerous waters, because a lot of business, your competitor, are already measuring ESG. And for advanced companies, they are already looking, what is the cost of better branding? Rather than investing in advertisements and, telling the nice stories, they are really investing in walking the talk, having a right culture, having the processes set up to actually enable a good business operation model. Now, the key thing, of course, is when you compare, how do you evaluate this? Are you able to compare, if you have a higher retention rate of your employees versus you're an organization that have people that come and go, what would be your cost? Because for leading companies, they started calculating what is the cost to replace a good employee who have worked with you for 10 years. And those kind of studies or statistics have been out in the market. So it's no longer rocket science to put the simple way of valuing your ES and G, depending on what's important to you. People, resources, as well as the efficiencies that you can get from managing this well. So the format is really to understand what you've been measuring. So for those who have been focused on accounting your profit, use that skill to account for additional add-on value on top of your profit. You will see leveraging and expanding your value calculation book next to your profit book will help you to navigate better.
Okay, well said. And Arina, can you?
I'll just say,
yeah.
just quickly, because I know we're running out of time. The question really, I think it's a historical question. It's something that existed in the past. As I mentioned, if you're a company that intends to be in business in 5 years' time, you can't ignore the future. If you want, it's not a challenge. It's not a cost. It's future. Your future operations will be based on how sustainable you are, how sustainably you use water, how you use energy, and how you manage the items that you discard at the end of their use cycle. I don't like to use the word waste, so I try never to use it. So, this is how you will operate. It's the same as, I used to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, now I wake up at 6, I operate differently. Companies will operate differently. And if you don't want to operate differently, you don't have to. But then you won't be in business in 5 years or 10 years' time. It'll be that simple.
Right. I think this is good summing up. So it is not just for the environment, for the planet, also for your own business. You have to move with time. This SDG, ESG, all this new mentality is going to help you or going to affect you adversely, your own business, depending on how your attitude towards it. Now, traditionally, we talk about CSO, but to me, CSO is more of your own conscience, your corporate conscience towards society. But now when we start talking about SDG and ESG, I think it's one step forward. It's much more focused, much more targeted, want to look at the result, and it is a two-way mentality. Now, I personally have learned a lot from the three distinguished speakers here, and thank you very much. I think our time is spot on, and I once again thank you for all the participants to bear with us, to listen to all this panel. I hope you all have bring some food for further thought away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.